All right, we're going to start up right away. Just so you know, for the rest of the week and for next week, this is the plan. We're going to start building an application, as I think I mentioned to you yesterday. We won't get it done today. It's totally fine. Hopefully, we'll get it, most of it done tomorrow. And then you're going to get an assignment off of that. Probably I'm going to give you Monday and Tuesday to work on that. And then Wednesday, we're going to start on another project. Okay? All right. So what we're going to be building is what's known as a RESTful API. REST is an acronym. It stands for, I think it's representational state transfer or something like that. So notice what it says. It's an API that conforms to the constraints of REST architecture style and allows for interaction with RESTful web services. All right. Now, what does that mean? It means that there's other ways of doing this other than REST. REST is the one that's most commonly used. So that's what we're going to be building. Now, we have talked about this before. I try to look at an API as a way for two different things to communicate with one another. They're two things that are not the same thing to communicate with one another. I mean, for instance, if I go out to, what is it? docs.microsoft.com, right there. If I just go out to docs.microsoft.com, I'm going to get rid of the rest of this. That pretty much is Microsoft's API. So if I want information about something and how to do something, and you've all gone through this already. So if I forgot, hey, how do you work with C# classes? Something like that. I'd go out there. Does that make sense? All right. So there's a lot of stuff in here. I'm not going to sit and read to you, but it's a pretty decent article. I did not copy it, but what I'll do is I'll just grab this URL right here and I will send that to you during the break. All right, and any other URLs that we might happen to come across. There might be one or two. I don't know. All right, I'm watching a bunch of tapes on REST APIs. Okay, so what I'd like to have us do first, please, is I'd like everybody, including me, we're all going to go out to github.com to start with. Let's get it way the hay over here. There we go. And I'm going to close that so I don't get any mail while we're doing this. So let's see, what do we got here? Nothing. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go out to mygithub.com. And again, I'd like you to do the same thing. However you start up a new repository, I always just click the plus sign here and choose new repository. If you don't do it that way, then whatever way you do it. All right. And we are going to call this pretty much what it is. And that is Node-JS- I'll try that again. Node.js MySQL REST API. Kind of a long name, but I wanted it to be descriptive of what it is we're going to be doing. So if you can't read that, because I know how badly this shows on here, so you hit enter a couple times. It's right there. Node.js/MySQL/REST/API. All right. Of course, as always, make yours private. I'm keeping mine public. We don't need to worry about any more of this. We are going to add our own gitignore file later, so don't worry about it. All right, so click Create Repository. You've done this kind of thing before. Please go over and grab this line right here. Is Git Remote Add Origin. Of course, yours will be different than mine. Should be the second last line that's in there that says, or create a new repository on the command line. So again, for me, mine look like that. All right. Okay. So let's go in. Let's right mouse click on your desktop or wherever you create your folder structure. All right. And what we want to do is we want to call this folder the same thing. So it's going to be node hyphen, all in lowercase, JS hyphen, try it again, Node.js hyphen, MySQL hyphen, REST hyphen API. And if you say, I didn't get that, it's the same thing we did here, this. All right. Questions? Problems? All right. Now, you can do this any way you want, but because I find it easier to do this way, I'm just going to right mouse click in this empty folder and choose New, go down to Text Document that's right down near the bottom, change this and make it server.js. Yes, I want to change the extension, so now I've got that in there. All right. Again, I'm just going to keep going on, and if you've got a question, I'm going to take for granted that you're going to stop me and ask me. All right. Now with that there, I'm going to, with our new folder, I'm going to right mouse click on it and choose Open with Code. So I've got it in Visual Studio Code. All right, so that is, and of course I didn't make mine server.js. I called it JST for some goofy reason. There, no, it's okay. Now, I'm going to go back for just a second to my folder right in here. Probably should have done this first, but you know the routine because we've done this enough. In other words, I want you to right mouse click on the folder and choose Git Bash here. Nothing new here. Now, you know this. You don't have to type this in. Right now, if I type in git status, I'm going to get an error because I have not yet created the repository. I'm going to create the repository right now. So I'm going to say git init and hit enter. I'm going to keep as much of this up on the screen as I can. Now you know again, if I do a git status, there it is. All right. Now, we're not going to worry about adding. We're not going to worry about committing. We're not going to worry about any of that stuff. Not right now. But what we do want to do is that line I told you to copy. This one is git remote. Go back if you don't have it in your clipboard. If you do have it on your clipboard someplace, and just paste it in here. We want to make sure that our remote, once we push this thing out to GitHub, all right, we want to make sure that there's a connection between the two. Okay? All right. Let's see. All right. Then I'm going to clear the screen here. And we're going to do our npm init. And we are going to do an init, and we're going to do it together. And we're going to make it bigger, and we're going to put in more stuff that we usually don't put in. Now, the package name is just fine. That's the name of our folder. That's good. So hit enter. The version is fine, so we'll hit enter. The description, this, again, if you don't like my description, just add your own. It's totally fine, okay? Just something like that. Again, if you don't like what I put, you can put your own stuff in there as long as it makes sense and it's okay. The entry point, hopefully you've created the server.js file already when I did. So it should say server.js, so hit enter. The test command, there isn't any. Now, just so you know, because we haven't gone over that, there are testing tools that you can purchase for Node.js. And if you had those, you could put in those commands if you had them. We're not doing that, so I'm just going to hit enter. Notice the Git repository should be filled in, at least mine is. Hopefully yours is as well. Hit enter again. Keywords, I'm just going to put a couple in here. Node.js, comma, MySQL, comma, database, comma, REST, comma, representational state transfer, comma, API, comma, and then application program interface. I could put in more. I think that's plenty. All right, and I'm going to hit enter again. Author, my name, you put in yours, of course. License, again, the open source one is MIT, so I'm just going to put that one in. Hit enter, says sorry. Oh, okay, because it didn't like it because I didn't put MIT in all caps. There. All right, so that's what mine looks like right now. So is that okay? Hit enter. I'm going to clear. I always like to do this. You, of course, do not have to. And that is back here in Visual Studio Code, I'm just going to look at my package.json file and make sure that everything looks the way that I want it to look. All right. Now, you know this. I'm just going to do it now, okay? And that is, we don't need this test line. So I'm going to get rid of that. And I'm going to put a comma at the end of this one, and we're going to add NodeMon in just a second. So as we've been doing, I'm going to put in here dev, and then NodeMon server.js. Okay? Now, I do want you to understand something, and that is right now, I mean, you can all look, you know this when you look here, that as of right now, we have no dependencies. All right, we're going to add some right now, but I do want you to understand what this file is it's also known as a manifest file. And the reason that this file is important is we are going to go, in fact, we can do it right now. Let's go into here because I want you to start hopefully putting pieces together here. So right here, I want you to click new file, and I want you to put a period dot get ignore and hit enter. All right. And as of right now, we don't even have this yet, but we will in just a minute. We want to put in that node modules folder that's going to get added to us. What this is going to mean is ideally tomorrow, we're going to push this thing up to Heroku. All right. And you'll at least have a partially completed program. You'll be working on it and then you'll push it back again later. And that's no big thing. But the point is, since this won't be included, all right, if we gave this to someone and they wanted to run it on their machine, they would have to enter from a command line npm space install. Then it would add everything that's in there as dependencies in the package.json file. That's why you do it that way. But if you've ever looked at how many folders are in there, they're big, and it's several meg worth of folders. There's no sense in adding that, pushing that thing out to the internet. It really makes no sense. All right, so that's why it's done that way. So for now, we may add something else to get ignore later, but for now, I'm just going to do a file save, and I'm going to close my get ignore file, just for now. All right, then I'm going to go back here again, and we're going to, as I said, we're going to say npm I minus capital D nodemon. npm I for install minus D because it's a development dependency, nodemon, and hit enter. And you'll notice that once I do that, if you look on the side here, once it kicks in, I'm going to have a node. There's my node modules folder. All right, and hopefully when I created it before I put node underscore modules, I think I did. All right, and now you notice when we look in here, okay, somewhere in here, we will now have a dependency. We might have to close it and open it again. It's no big deal. All right. Now we are going to put our regular dependencies in here as well. Now, what I want is I'm
having a problem. I got a bunch of npm errors.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what, we'll take a look in just 1 second.
Right.
But I want you to type this line in. I don't want you to hit enter yet. Okay? All right. So we're going to do a regular npm I for install, and there's going to be 4 things we're going to install: Express, MySQL, Morgan. We're going to look at these in just a minute, and body-parser. Don't hit enter yet. Okay? Let's see if we can figure out what.
Yeah, actually, it worked the second time.
Okay. Okay. All right. Before we go and add all this stuff, my question to you is, do you understand the role of Express? All right. What it is designed to do is it's designed to make the act of being able to set up routing for your different URLs and make it more convenient. We have not really started to look at how Express does that. We will tomorrow. All right. So that's the first one. MySQL is literally just that. It allows us to bring MySQL functionality into our app. And then let's look at the other two. All right. So you don't have to do this, but I'm going to go out here to npmjs.com. And the first thing I'm going to look at here is Morgan. Morgan is what's referred to as a logger. We're going to include a logger in here, so when we try to do something down in our server area, the thing, that the Git Bash window, it's going to show us what we attempted to do. And why would you want to do that? Because if something goes wrong, you'll know right where it went wrong. And when you do this, there's different ways that you can install this, and there's different ways that you can use this. They're in here. But if you look under the options, the two that we're going to care about the most are short and combined. Combined gives you tons of information. It even tells you the type of computer you're using and a bunch of other stuff, in addition to what you've just done and the commands you put in. So we're logging the commands as we put them in, basically. And I don't mean like hitting clear or whatever. I mean like if we go to a URL, it's going to say what we attempted to do, that kind of thing. All right, so we'll look at that, but there's another one, it's in here someplace, that's called short. And it just gives us the basic information, and that's all we're going to need. A little bit later, we're going to look at both of these, just so you can see them both. All right, and then the other one that's in here, and I'm going to search packages for body-parser. All right, that's the other one that we're going to add. Now you'll notice, as it says, again, it's middleware, which means that we're going to have to say app, we're going to call our thing app. We're going to have to say app.use because that'll bring the middleware in. All right. So it says it's body parsing middleware. It says parses incoming request bodies in a middleware before your handlers. All right. What the hell does that mean? It's going to allow us to basically go in and take what we put in a form and parse it out into its individual pieces. We're gonna literally, by the end of the period today, we'll have created at least one form, and it'll be real simple. In fact, we're gonna go out to get Bootstrap and we're gonna copy their stuff, and we're just gonna change the names and a few other things that are in there. All right, but it basically, that's what it does, and that's what it allows us to do. All right. So let's go back to server.js now. In fact, we put this in, we didn't hit enter. So go ahead and hit enter. I just wanted to make sure you heard all that stuff. All right, so I put that in. I'm just going to clear this for right now. And I do want you to see this. You don't have to do it. But if I right mouse click on node_modules, right now it says that that's 5 meg. I guess that isn't really humongous. But the funny thing is, if you look at the whole project, and you look at the size, it's most of the size of the project. All right, and after a while, it can end up getting even bigger than this. All right. Whoops, don't need that anymore. There we go. All right, I want to check something on mine just because I don't trust myself. And that is, I'm going to go look at my git ignore. I did put underscore. Good. All right. So let's bring up, you shouldn't need your package.json at least for a while, if any more. So yeah, I want to save it, I guess. All right, and so file, save, failed to save. The content is newer. Please compare your version. Okay, what it doesn't like is I had it open. I'm not going to save, but now if I open it back up, what you're going to see is I've got those new dependencies in there. All right, they weren't in there and I was attempting to save and it was trying to tell me, hey, I don't think you want to do this. And they were right. All right, so we're going to open up server.js. By now, with what I'm about to show you, much of it should be in your mind as it's kind of boilerplate code in that it's stuff we're going to do every time. So we're going to add more than this, but at a minimum, we're going to put in like 4 or 5 lines of code virtually every time we do this. So we're going to say const, not there. Try that again. We're going to say const express equals require express. Now we're going to put more stuff in here than this, just so you know, but I'm going to hit enter a couple times. All right, so I'm going to put some more consts in there in just a minute. So I'm going to say const app equals express, and then I'm going to say const port equals process.env.port, or I'm just going to pick 4444. I don't know. You can put any number in there, okay? And it shouldn't matter. Any number at least between 3,000 and 99.99. It doesn't matter. I just picked that one out. All right, and I'm going to say here app.listen port, and we'll put in an arrow function that just does a console.log. Like that, and our semicolon here. All right, I'll give you a second to put that in. And you don't have to do this, but I'll put a comment here, whoops, that says add npm packages. I'm going to add Node.js core modules. I think the only one that we're going to possibly need is path. So I'm going to say here const path equal require path and hit enter. All right. So that kind of at least is a boilerplate. All right. Now, if I were to go run this, I'm not going to. But if I were to go run this right now, I could go out and what I should see in my server window, my get bash window, is I should see a message that says server up and running on port 4444. If I go and try to bring this up on a web page, so if I go to localhost :4444, it's going to give me an error. And the reason it's going to give me an error is I haven't created a route for that yet. So you don't have to do this, but if you just watch for a second. So again, I'm just going to say npm run dev. That should work. It says error missing script dev. Oh, I thought that's what I called it. Oh, it's nodemon, not in. Well, let's see once. I thought I put it in there correctly. I could have screwed it up. So let's see. Oh, somehow it didn't save that. Okay. That's on me. And so this was dev, and this was nodemon server.js. Save that, close that, try this again. So let me clear, try that again. npm run dev. Okay, server up and running on 4444. You've already seen this kind of stuff. I want to move on from here. But if I do come in and say localhost 4444 and I hit enter, I get a cannot get there. So it's trying to go to what it considers to be the home page for my application. Since I don't have the home page routed to anything, I haven't created it yet, all right, nothing's going to happen. All right, hopefully all of that makes sense. All right, so I'm going to go back to my server.js file. And since we added those other dependencies that were in there, so we've got const express, that was the first one. So I'm going to put const MySQL equals require MySQL, const Morgan equals require Morgan. All right. And I think, if you stop for a second and look up on the screen, I think I mentioned this to you before, but what I'm about to do is going to result in a mistake. So if I come in and say const, and I try to give it its name, body hyphen parser, and I say equals require, this is, we'll fix it in a minute. All right, body hyphen parser, it's giving me that error because variable names in JavaScript cannot contain a minus sign. Remember, variables, the only thing you can put in a variable, there's 4 things: letters, numbers, $, and underscore. All right, well, that doesn't cut it here because this is one of them. Technically, it thinks that's a minus sign. And it thinks technically I'm trying to subtract parser from body. So typically the way we get around that is like this, and that will work. Now what I've shown you right now has nothing to do with getting the app up and running to begin with. All right, so in other words, the only thing that we need to get this app running up, to begin with, is this line right here, that const express line, the const app line. We could have even left off the port and right here just put in a port. All right. Okay. Now we're going to end up moving stuff around and putting other stuff in, etc., as we go along. So instantiate an instance of express. Set port variable and begin running server. Now I'm going a little nuts here with the comments, but I just want to make sure as we go through this that virtually everything that we're doing makes sense to everyone. All right, so we're going to end up moving this and changing this around, but for now we're just going to add our first route. So add, we'll just call it our /route handler. All right, and this will be app.get. So if we go to /, remember, and we're going to go over this again because we're going to keep going over it until you say, yeah, I got it. Just shut up already. All we're going to put in here for now, again, we'll change this in a bit, but we're going to say res.send welcome to my Node.js MySQL. What did we call it up here? Well, it is REST API. REST API app. And again, what you say in there doesn't matter. If you just want to say welcome, totally fine. We're going to end up changing this around anyway as we go on. Okay? So now if I do a Control S, what I should notice is it has restarted the server right here if you look on the screen. Anytime that you make a change to a .js file like that, it's going to restart the server. Now if I go back to where we just were and I refresh the page, it says welcome to my Node.js MySQL whatever. All right, and again, my hope is that by now you're just like, yeah, go on, I get all that, and that's good if you're there. Okay, all right. Now for today, we're going to be mainly working with just JSON data for today. And if you go, I don't know what JSON data is, well, I'm going to show you right now. because we're going to make some. All right. So what I'd like you to do is back in your server.js file, we're just going to add another route. So this is, just so you know, it works like a waterfall. So if I've got, let's say that I've got 6 app.get statements. As soon as it finds one that it matches, it doesn't go on to the other ones. So if it doesn't match 1, it goes on to 2. If it matches 2, it doesn't go through 3, 4, 5, and 6. Does that make sense? We're also going to put one at the end when we get done, that if it doesn't match one of the routes that we have, we'll send back a 404 error, which means file not found. All right, we'll worry about that later. So this is add that route handler. And for now, because we're going to be working with our books database, so if yours still doesn't work, we're going to have to get yours working during the break, okay? So I'm going to say here, add, we'll just call it for now, show all authors page. For right now, we are not worried about actually hooking onto the database. We're going to get there. We're going to get there before the end of the day. We're going to get there fairly soon. All right. But for now, we're going to put another route in here. So we're going to do an app.get. And this one will be /authors. All right. And again, a request response, or which again is almost always abbreviated like is shown there. Okay. So when we get here, we're going to add some data. I want you to type in the first line I type in, then I want you to copy it 4 times. Do you hear what I said? Because otherwise, if you say, I'm going to type it in 4 times, don't do that. All right, so I'm going to put in here const author1 equal, and we're going to put everybody, including me in the class, in here. Try that again, not done. All right, so that's the first one. And again, after you put that one in, copy it 4 times. So it looks like that. All right, I just did it in alphabetic order. You can do it in any order you want. If you want to put me at the end, it doesn't really matter. We're not going to keep this very long, but this is just for now. And if I spell anybody's name wrong, you got to let me know. I'm doing it off the top of my head. All right, so we now have, in fact, we got, look on the screen here, because I didn't do this. You can't give them all the same name or we're going to run into trouble. So they'll make them author 1 through author 5. Okay, I'll give you a second to put that in. Everybody got that? Okay, I'm going to put in a line of code. Don't you put it in yet because it's wrong. And I'm going to fix the line of code, all right, after I put it in. But I want to explain to you why it's wrong, because it's an error many people make. All right, so we've done a res.send before. You've seen res.end. We've even seen a res.render. All right, but we're going to put in here res.json. And again, this will not succeed. So I'm going to put in here author 1, author 2, author 3, author 4, and author 5. All right. Anybody, you don't have to, but anybody want to take a wild guess as to why this isn't going to succeed?
Because you didn't put a top 10 res and JSON?
Res, oh, well, that's right. That is true. Now, does anybody have any idea why it still will not succeed?
Nope.
No, it'll actually, they're all good guesses, and your comment was very pertinent. But the problem is, it's looking at all those and it thinks it doesn't understand that they're related. It needs to be shown that they're an array, basically. So if I save this and I come back to here, again, I should notice my server is again restarted. And if I come back to here, and now I put in /authors, again, I should get an error message. I may not get it here. It showed me that. All right, it showed me the first name. That's good. That's a good start. But hey, there were 5 of us. Where is everybody else? Well, if I go back to here, well, when I did it before, it gave me an error. Here it's not. That's okay. I want everybody to print. So we're going to come in here and we're going to say bracket here and bracket here. And ideally, at least, that's going to show us everybody. So I put in the bracket here and the ending bracket there. I'm going to save. Again, my server has restarted. When I go back to here and I refresh, now notice everybody's in there. See that? Now, I'm not saying that like, isn't that amazing? I just wanted you to realize that when we first start printing out our database information today, we're basically going to have it come out as JSON. All right. Now, one thing is, if you were all authors, there's actually something that's missing here. Does anybody know what's missing? What's something that distinguishes every single one of those records from every other record?
The ID.
Yes, there's no ID. We didn't add one, and that's okay. But the reason I'm telling you that is later on when we start to print out every author that's in the database, when we first do it, we're going to show the IDs. But that's not typically information you need to, have to, or really should share with end users. For lack of better words, it's none of their damn business. All right? Because in some ways, at least, it could be personal information. If somebody found out the ID and was able to get into a database, and if it was probably be another database and how much they were paying those authors or whatever, that could lead to problems. So what we'll talk about later is how to print out the information and make it look like this, as opposed to having here, you know, a line up here that says ID:1, ID:2, etc. All right? Okay. Okay, now, we talked about this before. If you look up on the screen, I showed you this, but I want to put this into action. I want you to see when we're logging stuff, exactly what is happening. I mean, you have to, in your heads, get into it the idea that when you were taking the AWD 1000 class a year ago, you were basically the person sitting at the desk typing in a URL and hitting enter. In this class, after they hit enter, you're the person on the other end who's going to answer their request. So we learned how to make requests in the AWD 1000 class. Now you're learning how to respond to those requests in the AWD 1111 class. All right, and that's, you know, so it's client side versus server side. All right. All right.
I feel like I'm a little behind here. How did we get that package.json thing?
Okay. How did we get that?
Yeah.
It's when you ran the command. First of all, when we installed the packages, it automatically created that for us. So when we did the npm I, all right, and it's a fair question. It's a good question. In fact, let's do this. Now that we've got this, you can all do it. Let's go back again. Hopefully this will help you. And we're going to go back into here. And that node modules folder we've got, highlight it and delete it. Literally delete it. So tell it you want to move it to the recycler bin? Yes. Okay. Now that we have a package.json file, which you've seen, that has this stuff in it, that stuff, now we can go back and in here, stop your server if it's running. and type in npm install. Nothing, just npm install. And Gabriel, if you look on the screen, what's going to happen over here is in just a minute, the node modules is going to come back. There it is. So when you originally create it, okay, what we could have done, just so you know, and I'm glad you asked the question, seriously, because we could have made our package.json file just like this, and then we could have run npm install. You see the difference? Rather than typing in npm I and listing all the package names, we could have just included all of them like this, and then run npm install like we just did. So you can do it either way. Most people have some kind of an idea. In fact, when you do this long enough, I'm still getting there, but if you do this long enough, you pretty much know, hey, I'm going to need these 6 or 7 packages. So you do the npm I and you put in those 6 or 7 packages. All right. Now, even though I remove node modules, and one of the things that node modules has in it, in fact, if we look, there's Express, there's Morgan, there's Body Parser, there's MySQL, and there's NodeMod. All right. So even though, I should be able to close this. I shouldn't have to save it or anything. But now I should be able to come back in here and clear this just so you see it. I should be able to come in and say npm run dev. And boom, it's up and running again, right? Okay. All right. Hopefully that answered your question, at least somewhat.
Well, I was more or less looking for how we got all that stuff that was in
the node modules.
In package.json.
You got that when we did the npm init. Remember, we typed in npm init as a class, and we walked through the steps where it found your GitHub repository. You put in the author name and the version name, etc.
I don't remember that.
Well, this is the first thing that we did today. All right, unless you didn't do it when we did it, and that is we came in and we typed in npm init. All right, that creates the package.json file. So if you still don't have an npm, or if you still don't have a package.json file, all right, if you don't have one, or if it's in, the other thing too is, let's say, okay, I've got this file, I've got this package.json file, but it's incomplete. In other words, I didn't put my name on there for the author, and I wish I would have. You can go into this file and change it anytime you want. So if later, all right, so let's say you get this to work, and we get it to a certain point ourselves. We get it to work. Boom. All right. Now, you come back in, and I said, now make these changes. You might want to come in and manually change that to version 2. And you can do that. It's totally fine. All right. If I had spelled something wrong in here, I could change it, etc. I wouldn't recommend anything that the system created for you, like the URL for GitHub. I wouldn't recommend changing that. But if I spelled representational wrong, it's amazing I got it right. But if I'd have gotten that wrong, I could go back and manually change it in there. All right. So again, that's the first thing we did today was we said npm space init. And we were right at the command line. We started entering stuff. That's when I entered. It came up and it asked for keywords, and I put in this stuff. All right. It came up and it asked for description, and I put in that. In fact, it asked me for this. It defaulted to the name of the folder. It asked for our version. It asked for this. Then it asked for test. In here, we didn't put anything into test, so it just took the default. It asked for our GitHub repo, but it was filled in automatically for us. Then it asked us for keywords, and we put in these. It asked us for author, and we put in this. And it asked us for license, and I put in MIT. If you remember the first time I put it in, I put MIT in. Somehow the T was lowercase, so it gave me an error because it wanted it to be an uppercase. All right. And then once we did that, it created virtually everything that's in here. Then we went in and did our npm I minus D for nodemon. That put in this. Then we did our npm I express, body parser, MySQL, and Morgan, and that put in these. Okay? All right. So let's go back into our server file right here, and we're going to be adding stuff as we go on. I would recommend all these consts to put all the stuff that you're going to put in under those const statements. Everybody with me? So I would because we're going to put some code in right now. Okay. And in fact, what we're going to put in here is we're going to start using some middleware. What Morgan is it's what's referred to as a middleware logger. In other words, there's three kinds of middleware, just so you know. There's the kind you make. We're going to do some of that. There's the kind that you can add. Basically Morgan is, like an NPM, so there's system stuff. All right. And there's going to be yet other stuff that we'll talk about later. I don't want to get anybody too confused. But, so I'm going to put in here, use middleware. And the reason I put in a comment like that is it's app.use. And you have to tell it what we want to use. What do we want to use? Well, we want to use Morgan. How do we want to use it? We're going to use Morgan short. Okay? You have a problem with anything, Angie?
Yeah, my computer froze up. So
Okay. No. That's okay. We can wait for a minute.
Okay.
Were you caught up until that point?
Yeah, I was
Okay.
Let me just type in that line and here you go.
Yes.
Thanks.
You can put the comment in or leave it out. That's up to you. All right. So app.use Morgan. So we're bringing in that Morgan logger and we're using its short format. Okay. So I'm going to save this. All right. I'm saving that. And I'm going to go back. And again, it should have, when I restart, I didn't restart. So I have to restart the server. So npm run dev. All right. I want that to start up again. No errors. That's always good. So what I want to show you though is this. Okay, so you can see that, npm, etc. So I'm going to come in here. It's going to sound a little strange or look a little strange, but where we are in here, I'm going to refresh this 2, 3, 4 times. You don't have to do that, but I just refreshed it 4 times. Now I'm going to go back to my home page, and I'm going to hit enter. And then I'm going to refresh that 3 times. Are you with me? All I did was just go to both pages that I've created routes for. Why did I do that? Well, I'm going to go back here now and look at what it did. This is what Morgan does. It said I made a GET request to my /authors page, all right, the version of HTTP I'm using, and it gave me a 304 response. I don't remember offhand what 304 is, all right, but it's okay. All right, and how much time it took in milliseconds. And then I did I thought I did 3 times, so maybe I did it 4 times here. All right, so that's the short format. Everybody with me there? All right, then let's make one change. So let's change this word short. So change that to the word combined. So for right now, we're going to change it back in just a minute, but I want you to change that word short to the word combined. Everybody with me? All right. Now, I'm going to come back here and notice it restarted my server, right? Good. That's what I want. So I'm going to come back to here, back to my browser page, and this time I'm just going to refresh it twice. So twice here, 1, 2. I'm not even going to go to the other page. All I did was I hit the refresh button twice. That's it. Now when I go back to here, see the difference? It's got the same information up here and then a lot of other stuff. I can't even tell you what all this is. This is literally what it considers the version of Windows I'm using, Windows NT 10. It says I've got a 64-bit machine. I have no idea what the Apple WebKit is doing in here. and Chrome is my browser, I have no idea what Safari was doing in there. Now, almost always, the combined is going to give you more information than you need. All right, so again, I'm going to go back into my server.js file, and I'm going to change the word combined back to the word short, and I'm going to save. All right, once I save, I'm going to go back, and again, it restarted, and all I'm going to do is in my browser, I'm going to go to my home page and refresh once, and then I'm going to go to my authors page and hit, whoops, got to spell it right, and hit enter. In fact, let's do that. I'm going to put in a page that doesn't exist. Do you all hear me? So I'm just going to type hello in here and hit enter. Now it says it can't get there. You can see that. But when I come back here, the logger has shown me what I've tried to do every time. This can be very useful as a debugging tool. All right, but I think that short will work just fine for our needs. So we're just going to leave it set as short. All right, we're going to take a break in just a couple minutes, but before we do, you don't have to do this, but you can if you'd like to. All right, and that is, I want you to look on the screen here, and I don't know if I've got it up any place or not, so I'm going to type in here PHP myadmin. I'm going to bring up PHP myadmin. All right, and what do I want to do? All right, this is interesting, so let's see if use. You don't have to type this in. Books. I don't know why it would be doing that. Okay, it says you have an error in your syntax. Authors, that's what I want. Okay, so I'm using that. Good. And if you look at the authors table, that's what's in it, right? So it's pretty darn simple. All right, I don't know why my things got changed as far as their order, and that doesn't matter. But when you look in here, and if I say describe authors, you don't have to type it in. But if I put that in, notice what it's showing me. It's showing me that's the schema for that table. That should make sense to all of you. So it's telling me I've got 3 fields. Author ID, which is an integer, it defaults to size 11 for an int. You know, whatever that number is, 99,999,999,999. All right. It cannot be null. It's the primary key. It has no default, and it's an auto increment field. You can only have one auto increment field, and literally 100 times out of 100, it's your primary key. It's an ID. All right. Then we've got first name, which I made as a variable character length field of size 25, cannot be null. And even though it says the default in there is null, if you don't put in a default for it, that's what it defaults to. What I don't want is I don't want something that's got like for the author. I don't want it like unknown first name and unknown last name. No, I want you to have to put in the name of an author. Does that make sense? So later we're going to create a very simple form today. It's going to have 2 fields in it, author first name and author last name, and a submit button. And if you click submit, we're going to check and we're going to see, hey, the values you put in there, we're going to trim them. And if they're empty, we're not going to allow that to take place. So this is how we're going to be able to insert a new author. Now, if you put in there 123 for the first name and 456 for the last name, it's going to think that's the author's first name and last name. We could check for stuff like that as well. We could do that. But then it starts to get a little hinky. And what I mean by that is, okay, last names don't just, they can have hyphens. Last names can have an apostrophe. Last names can have a space, etc. And I don't want to worry about that kind of stuff right now with what we're doing. All right. Okay, so what we're going to do in just a minute is we're going to add another route. What we want to be able to do, we'll take a break in a minute, but what we want to be able to do, you've already seen this. We can come here and we can type in authors. All right, and boom, we get all the authors, right? Now it's back to regular size. Okay, so we could get all authors. What we want to be able to do is we want to be able to type in, for example, authors/5, and it's going to give me an error now. But when we put that in, we want it to just show Angie's information because her ID is 5. Does that make sense? So right now we've got a route that's called authors that shows all authors we have in our table. All right. What we want is to have another route that we're going to put in after the break that's just going to show an individual author. All right. It is 1:02. Let's come back, please, at 1:15. We'll start back up again. And hopefully, again, if something isn't making sense, hopefully you're going to ask. And I appreciated, I appreciated the question. I'd much rather take a minute or two off and go over that than have you think, I don't know what the heck this means.
Talk the keywords we have.
What's that?
Talk the keywords we have. I'm getting it all set up.
All right. These are the ones I put in. You can put them all in Noah.j. You don't need this. You don't need the double quotes. You put in the comma between each one, but you can put them all in one line.
Okay.
And then it'll basically redo it like this.
My authors aren't showing on the.
Your what isn't showing?
The authors.
Okay. So let me do this. Let me pause the tape right now. Okay.